Greetings and welcome back once again. This is Amuna. Stay tuned. All right. Greetings and welcome back once again. This is Amuna. I pray everybody's doing well. True to form, anytime I start paying attention to something, I can't help myself from looking deeper and trying to find the Soulonomics perspective of the whole conversation. And so, given that there's like 50 million videos, I like to get to the root of the problem. I like to, if I can, get to the core of it just for my own edification. And when I do such things, I like to come and share. I did it with the R. Kelly situation, many other situations. And here I am again, unable to help myself, looking at this Tupac and situation from the beginning, if we could. So I'm going to use the information that they have given us. And why do I do this? I do this to illustrate to myself and others that if we desire to begin to understand and apply our minds, we can. And then by doing so, we can use these methods in our own lives and navigate through the information. So with that said, I'm going to play something straight through. And before I started, my head started to hurt a little bit. So if I stop and I'm a little bit, just bear with me. But we're going to start at the beginning. We're going to start with their own words. Their own words. We're going to start with their own words. And then we're going to come back and break down their own words. Yeah? So let's get this video on and popping right now. Starting with their own words. It's like my mind is like putting the pieces together, and then I have to go back and put it together. So we're going to start with, oh, wait, hold on. Where did I put the, yeah, pause. Where did I put the video? I tried to upload it here, but it was acting a little crazy. So, where did the video go that I put together? Bear with me 1 second. I thought I pulled it up. No. One moment. How's everybody doing today? If I listen to too much, and this is just even people in my life, anything, if I start listening to too much, oh man, then I'm gonna have to be like, pull out my notepad so I could get all my thoughts out the way. So here we go. We're gonna start. I'm gonna play it more than once. Pause. I'm gonna play it more than once, so no worries. Because sometimes, I hear a lot of people like they were in a relationship, this, that, and she's contesting and he's not here to say. And I'm like, you know what? Let me share my screen, share the audio. I don't know why every time I say that's crazy. All right, boom. Now I'm going to remove this right here. Boom. All right. So this is a little something I put together with the audio. Okay. And I'm going to let it play straight through. And then we're going to double back on the conversation. And then I'm going to share my thoughts.
Jada Pinkett. Jada's my heart. You know what I mean? She would be my friend.
going from a homeless shelter to a project or having to worry about having enough.
I put my side on mute. That's why I was asking if you heard the audio. So let me pull it back and let you hear it from the beginning. One moment. I wasn't sure if you could hear the audio. All right, let's try again.
Jada Pinkett. Jada's my heart. You know what I mean? She would be my friend for my whole life. Or maybe y'all relationship. I had a relationship with Pac.
Yeah.
You know.
It's kind of hard because I haven't really told the whole story. You know, the one of the things that's very interesting that I've never really said before is that when I first met Pac, when we first met, I was a drug dealer. And yes. And that was, and so to just give you, I won't get into the details of it because I'm going to write a book about it, but just to give you like, that's how we started.
I spent 3 years in Baltimore, my high school years. I made a lot of friends, like John Cole and Jada Pinkett.
This girl's bodily dimensions are hard for hard just to get her attention. She said, "Was that for me?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "Why?" I said, "Come on and take your eyes with the hell of a guy."
I loved my classes. We were exposed to everything. You know, theater, ballet, listen to different types of music, songs that became the soundtrack to my life.
What did you do that was, I mean, it seems like going from a homeless shelter to a project or having to worry about having enough food on the table must have been very difficult. How did you deal with that? Were there any therapeutic ways for you to heal yourself?
I smoked weed. I hung out with the drug dealers and the criminals, and I got.
And that made you feel better?
Interestingly enough, yes, because they're proud. They have those same problems, and they found a way to get out of it. As a kid, this is what I was thinking.
And so, did you end up selling drugs also because those were your?
I tried selling drugs for maybe 2 weeks. Then the dude was like, "Oh man, give me my drugs back," because I didn't know how to do it. I sell, somebody didn't pay me back. I'd be like, "Oh, it's okay."
Smoke most of it?
Yeah, no, I never smoked it. I just be like, "It's okay. You don't have to pay me back." Dudes would give me their watch and say, "Give me this amount for my watch."
Your pawn shop.
Yeah, and I give him his watch back, and he didn't give me no money. So he was like, "No more for you." So then the dope dealers used to just look out for me when I would come back from school. They'd just give me money and be like, "Don't get involved with this. Get out there, do your dream." So they was like my sponsors.
Recently, you've opened up and talked about back in your early days when you were younger. You said that you were a drug dealer, and you said you just decided that this one little piece was important to share.
A bad one at that.
You,
yeah.
You weren't even a good drug dealer?
I wasn't a good one.
Oh, no. But you said it was finally time to share. So why was now the time?
Well, I felt like there had been, and still is, a lot of missing pieces to my relationship with Tupac, and I know that there's a lot of intrigue around it, and I know that a lot of times people, kind of connect this romantically, but I think also it was time to share because I really had an existential crisis in regards to realizing how far I had come and having started in one place and had come out of a certain lifestyle and watched a friend go into that lifestyle and always thought, the higher power would bring him through and that I made it and that he didn't. Then as I was coming out, something very bad happened to me. As I was coming out of the life, he was going more into the life. And I've been having kind of an existential crisis around because I was coming out, he was going in. And, there was a point in which we met. And then we kind of were going our separate ways. And I just felt like, okay, God, one day you're going to do for Pac what you did for me, which is you saved me. And that just never happened for him. And that is something that I'm constantly having to confront.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And I think that missing component that neither one have ever discussed, because Pac and our relationship was about survival.
Yeah.
That's how it started. And I know that most people want to always connect it in this romance thing, and that's just because they don't have the story. But it was based in survival, how we held each other down. You know what I'm saying? And when you have somebody that has your back, when you feel like you're nothing, that's everything. You know what I'm saying? And so there's a lot of components to our story that we've never shared, you know, for a very specific reason. And, you know, I just decided that one little piece was important to share finally, because it gives more insight to who we were.
I mean, it's very insightful, but it's also
What? Give me you was like last year in New York? Yeah. Where? No, last day I was in Baltimore. The year before that I was in. I spent 3 years in Baltimore, my high school years, going to the School of Performing Arts. Then before that I was in New York. That's where I grew up. That was my total growing up part. We moved out of New York because all of these, because of my mother's choices, you know, and she couldn't keep her job because of her choices, because it was too much. Yeah, no, she was calm now. I mean, it was totally calm, but it was like they figured out who she was, and she couldn't keep her job. That should be illegal. So she lost her job, and of course we were like stranded in New York, and yeah, so we stranded in New York. So we moved to Baltimore, which was total ignorance town to me, because okay, it was just like, I mean, in Baltimore, it's just ignorant. I don't even. It gets me upset to talk about it. Baltimore has the highest rate of teenage pregnancy, the highest rate of AIDS within the black community, the highest rate of teens killing teens, the highest rate of teenage suicide, and the highest rate of blacks killing blacks in Baltimore, Maryland. And this is where we chose to live. So as soon as I got there, being the person I am, I said, no, I'm changing this. So I started a Stop the Killing campaign and safe sex campaign and AIDS prevention campaign and everything. And then I came back, and I felt like I did a lot of good. I did good things and everything. Came back. The second week I was in California, I got a call, and 2 of my friends were shot dead in the head. 2 of the friends that were working with me shot dead in the head. And it's just like, why try? Because this is what happens. But I still try, you know? And I can't, you know.
Well, you left Baltimore and came to Marin City.
Yes.
And when you were in Baltimore, you were in a school of the performing arts.
Yes.
How come you didn't enroll in one when you came to California?
I couldn't find one. When I came to California, I was broke, so I had to go to a regular high school.
But you eventually dropped out, right?
Yeah, sure did. I didn't have enough credits. Like, everybody was about to graduate. I went into 12th grade, about to graduate, everything. Right before I was about to graduate, they was like, you got to come back next year and get a health credit and a physical education credit. And I was like, oh, hell no. I had just barely made it out with money coming to school and lunch money and all that. I said, I got to get paid. I got to find a way to make a living. So I dropped out, knowing that I would have graduated. It wasn't no big thing. Not to say that y'all shouldn't graduate, but for me at that particular time, it was more important that I found somewhere to live.
But you did get your GED. You moved out on your own.
Mm-hmm.
And what did you get as far as a job is concerned? What did you do when you stopped going to school?
I only had 2 jobs ever in my life. One was in Round Table Pizza. I liked to make the pizza, but it was good. It was the perfect job to have it because I was hungry and I got to like eat all this pizza. That's why I ate, because everything is right there. You know, back that I was making pizzas on the side, bringing pizzas home. I'm calling in my own deliveries. You know? Let me get 2 shrimp with everything. But that job, I lasted about a month. Then I worked as the guy that packs your bags in the supermarket for about, 2 weeks. And the dude kept catching me writing raps by the time clock. I used to be like, you know, I'm going to write for
Instead
an
of
hour.
loading people's groceries.
She can carry her own shit. So,
did it ever occur to you that you might be able to get scholarships to go to college, or was that just not
I always
even an
wanted
issue?
to go to college, but I wanted to go to be comfortable. Like how people, like, I don't know, this might be presumptuous, but like I know a lot of people that are in college, they have their lives already okay. You know what I mean? Like someone's paying for them to go to college. They have somewhere to live. They have somewhere to live while they're going to college. You know, they get money, all that. Somebody can pay the tuition and all that. I don't have that. Until I can have that, I can't go to college, even though I want to, because that turned me on.
With all the encouragement that you got in Baltimore at the High School of Performing Arts for your acting, did it ever occur to you to come out to California and be a professional actor here when your mom moved out here?
Nah, that was the last thing on my mind. I came to California, I was broke, nowhere to stay.
What do you mean nowhere to stay?
I didn't have anywhere to stay. I was staying with a friend of a friend of a friend of my mother.
Why weren't you staying with your mother?
Because she was in Baltimore. We didn't have any lights and electricity. We was about to get evicted, so she sent me first. You know how mothers do, protect the young. So I went out there broke. I wasn't even thinking about acting. I was just thinking about surviving.
And so that really, I had that aha moment maybe about 2 days ago, and you know, nobody really knew that aspect of my life, that I had started out one way, and Pac, you know, started out one way, and then we kind of switched roles. It was the thing that bound us, but it was also the thing that apart as well.
How deep were you in that life, and how did you save yourself?
My mother saved me. My mother saved me. My mother got me out of Baltimore. I had gotten a scholarship, a small little scholarship to go to North Carolina School for the Arts, and something really horrible had happened to me that she found out about. And, you know, one day she just packed the car and was just like, "You're getting out of here. And, you know, you're going to do exactly what I say. You're going to get in the car right now." She drove me to North Carolina School for the Arts, and and my life completely took another turn from there.
All right. For those who just joined us, I wanted to run that all the way through. My name is Amuna. We are going to do the Soulonomics breakdown now. So I'm going to go to the beginning of this here conversation, because this was a compilation of clips that was taken over the course of time. The earliest clip was taken in 1988 when he was 17 years old, and all the way up to before he died, as well as Jada Pinkett into present time. Why do I say that, and why is this important? Because it's important to kind of hear all the different little bits and pieces of the story to place it together. And what I came to, I'm just going to put it in the front and then I'm going to prove it, is a trauma bond. Now, both of them said that this conversation was about survival. Their relationship was about survival. Okay. Now, rewind. In the end, she just said that they were in different places. Now, in the beginning, it is said that Tupac said of himself that he was introverted. He was a homebody. Jada said when she first met him, he wasn't the type of person that she would necessarily, a guy that she would look like. He was a little awkward. So he was a mama's boy. In the video, he talks not all about his mother. He was raised by his mother. He's not in the streets. He's not thug life. Conversely, when Jada, according to her own words, when she meets Tupac, she is in the streets. And eventually they trade places. Take a listen, because we're looking like, why does she keep crying in present day? What's going on? Why can't she get beyond it? This to me, from what I'm observing and from what I'm studying, this has nothing to do with what we think it has to do with. She has some type of, in my estimation, just viewing it, she has some type of guilt complex or some type of responsibility, some type of onus that she's taking on herself. Because you heard her say she thought that that the higher power would for him the way he delivered her. So they switched places. Sometimes you come into contact with people and you switch places. Destiny switches, right? And they get out, and then you get caught in that space. Now, if we rewind just a little bit, I want to start off by saying this. Sometimes we often forget that this picture that we see on the screen, they were young. They were young. So if we rewind the story, and then I'm going to play and stop. If we rewind the story, in 1986, according to what the records are saying, he arrives in the school, the Baltimore School of Arts. These two are born in 1971. Okay. So in 1986, he had just turned 15 years old and she was 14. She was born in September, because I looked it all up so I can be precise in what I'm saying. She's born in September. Therefore, they go to school according to what they say. He started in September the 12th, 86, and then a few days later she turns 18. So there's a connection between when she meets him and when she turns another year older. Another thing I think is interesting to note is that when she meets him, she's already in a position. She already just said it. When she met Tupac, she was a drug dealer. That means she was already in the streets. Now, if you look at the Red Table Talk, which I had to go back and take a look at, Jada Pinkett is coming from a family life that had its issues. Father was an alcoholic, according to the narrative of the mother, and abusive. According to her, the father left her at 7. And so the house and the mother was addicted to drugs, right? When I say trauma bond, it means that you and the other person had to have in some way have something that's similar, traumatic in your lives that you can bond over, right? People bond over losses, people bond over deaths, people bond over, it's something that's traumatic. In this case, I'm asserting, based on what they're saying, that and as he said earlier in the clip, when he got to Baltimore was the worst. You leave from New York, but when you go to Baltimore and other clips, he goes into, it's the murder capital, it's the rape capital. Baltimore is not the place to be. And so for this introverted young child who's now finding his space in the arts and expressing himself in this place, he says that he wanted to proactive, because his mother is the ex-Panther, he wanted to proactive move forward in changing the reality. But he now comes into connection with a woman, a young girl. She's not a woman, she's 15 years old. Okay, so they're young. And trauma bonds, they take hold when we are young. They can happen when we're older, but just think about the first time when you a glue, the adhesive to a glue, if you stick that on a surface fresh, it's gonna stick tighter than if you keep peeling off the glue, peeling it off, and kind of reapply. So some of those first applications are going to be the strongest. And so when she's entering into this new phase of her life from 14 to 21 is when she is meeting him. Okay, remember, we go through different phases of development. So I always say 0 to 7, 7 to 14, 14 to 21, and on. Each phase that we come into, there's something that's happening. Now, in 0 to 7, in her particular life, she does a strong father figure. That father figure is abusive. Her mother is a little bit spacey because her mother is overcome with her own situation and issues. In addition, the mother had a drug addiction. In his space, he had a father, but the father was also into the street life. The mother was getting politically ostracized because of her stances. And one of the things he often says is that he resented, was indifferent because of the poverty that they had to do. So now imagine this, these two people seemingly on the surface have nothing in common, but energetically they have a lot in common, right? And so they're attracted to each other in this way. It does not have to be romantically. We're talking about energy right now, right? Something about this person, she said, once you open up to him, he becomes magnetic. Something about this person is pulling her in, and something about her is pulling him in. And these two now come to a space where they have to survive. Now, tell me something. They ask him, did he ever try selling drugs? Later on, he says for a little bit, and he found comfort around the drug dealer. Question, who was the drug dealer? Did she not just say she needed to add this part to the story, that she was the drug dealer? Okay. And he's finding comfort. Why? Because the drug dealers became kind of like his sponsor. He has talent and he has ability, but he has no money. The reason he ends up leaving, I don't want to jump ahead, but the reason he's sent away from Baltimore, which is a place he didn't want to be in the first place, is because they were going to be evicted. They were broke and they didn't have any money. In an interview, Jada says the first time she met him, he only had 2 shoes and 2 pants. 2 shirts and 2 pants. So he's this child with, and they are children, let's make no mistake about it, that he's this child who is talented and has ability, but financially, both of them are struggling. Financially, Jada's struggling, but we have to understand. Sometimes when we have abusive, I'm not even looking at the comments right now, I'll come to the comments so I could get my thought off. Sometimes when we have abusive parents, we identify with one parent or the other. Right? In this case, in the way I'm seeing this story, in the beginning, Jada is identifying with her father, right? Her father is, even though her mother is present, the father left. And she needed a father. Later on, she goes to say that Tupac was the father, he was the brother, he was the protector, he was all of the things that she was lacking and that she needed and she found comfort in. Okay, now he had a strong mother figure, so he may have seen strength represented in her, but he also saw something that the mother lacked, was the access to capital, or that progressiveness towards getting what it is that you want. Now, these two, we're going to go back to the beginning. They're not necessarily in sequential, but they do give us the understanding that we need. And this conversation here is about 15-year-olds. I want us to keep that in mind. 15-year-olds. He leaves in 1988. By that time, he is 17-year-old. Okay. Sometimes an introverted 15-year-old, the way he mentions his name, you can see that deeply he had some type of love and affection towards her, but they're children or teenagers who are just coming into the next phase of their development and can easily, it's like your first crush, really, or the first time that you really, coming into yourself and attracting yourself towards something. It's cut deep. So let's go back so that we could kind of see where I'm coming from with this. Let me pull this thing back right here. Now let's listen to it again after I laid that kind of foundation of why I said this is, to me, a trauma bond, and why in today's space and time people keep comparing Will Smith, and I don't think these two conversations are on the same level, because they're coming from two different places. I think she's distorted in her mind because of the reality. She needed security, and then to me this is why it looks like she went for the secure one. But the losing of the person that you were in a trauma bond with before you were prepared to lose them, I think she's still in a grieving phase, even if, because people could grieve as long as they have not gone through the grieving process. The grieving process can take a normal part of the time, or you can go beyond the normal part of the grieving process and get into the space where it's normal now. So when people look and say, why is she still crying? It looks as though that she has not properly allowed herself to grieve and release. Before I play the video again, I'm going to go back and tie this book in. It didn't start with you, how inherited family trauma shapes who we are, and how to end the cycle, because both of them have this parental figures who have failed them in one way or another. Both of them could have, because you imagine a 15-year-old, what are y'all talking about? What you want to, oh wait, let me not start it. What you want to be in life, what you're going through. When this beginning song that they're dancing to is Parents Just Don't Understand. That's ironic, as many people will say, because later on Will Smith becomes her husband. But in this that they were performing in school, they're dancing to Parents Just Don't Understand. They have to, when you become friends with someone, you're bonding on something. You like the same things, you play the same sports, you go to the same school, or you have the same issues. Now let's listen to it again with that in mind.
It is my heart, you know what I mean? She will be my friend for my whole life, or maybe our relationship. I had her.
So basically, he goes on to say, and I didn't play the whole thing. He's like, Jada, his heart, he'll give her everything: his lung, his kidney, his bone marrow. He feels as though, to some degree, he owes her something, that he will go to this extent for her. Now, he's a poet, and he could be just, going in with the whole conversation, but he did definitely have an affinity towards her, a connection with her, even if it was, as they often say, not in the way that we understand a soul tie. It could well have been a soul for many reasons.
Relationship with Pac.
Yeah. It's kind of hard because I haven't really told the whole story.
Okay, now is when I get to comment. Yeah, we know, Jada, you have not told the whole story. Now, to a certain degree, I have to look up a little bit about when this woman is born. This woman is September people, right? Which is, they have different personalities each month, even though we don't go to say what's going to happen to my future, but each month has an energy that comes with her and comes with them, and how they operate and how they tell. Now, he was more of an air sign where he talks about everything. right? He's not necessarily going to hold it all back. That's why people's like, he was real. He is one that is very expressive, and he's going to tell you all about how he feels. She is a little bit more reserved in that. So 20 something years later, she's still piecemealing this conversation together for people to be like, what really happened. And she's more private in that respect. But I think when they came out with the movie All Eyes on Me, she felt compelled to say, I have to now speak up because people are surmising way too much about the relationship. And in that time, she's able to give enough information to come to this conclusion. But let's listen.
One of the things that's very interesting that I've never really said before is that when I first met Pac, when we first met, I was a drug dealer.
Lady, when you first met, you was in the 10th grade. You were 14, about to be 15, and he was 15. People usually go into drug dealers, especially in places like Baltimore, because you need money. You need access to money. Maybe your parents, we know he was impoverished. You said he was impoverished. You wanted maybe access to things that you couldn't get provided for at the home, and therefore you went into dealing drugs. Now, she goes on to later say that she was a bad drug dealer, but nonetheless, we see this, I'm not going to sit around and wait for somebody to do it mentality. I'm going to go do it myself. And that may have intrigued him. You know what I mean? What did you be like, hey, what's up? Where are you going for second period? By the way, I'm a drug dealer. Like, how did that conversation go? But let's continue.
Yes. And that was, and so to give you, I won't get into the details of it because I'm going to write a book about it, but just to give you, like, that's how we started.
That's how we started. That means if they switched places, to some degree, she's the gateway. So to some degree, she is the friend that introduces him, even if it was around him in times past because he's growing up in New York. But she's the friend. But his mother is inculcating him with empowerment, with all of their mother's making sacrifices for the betterment of society, right? And if he's up under his, that necessarily wouldn't be the first go-to, like, hey, I should be a drug dealer. But now you're in a new place and you're meeting new people. And one of the people that even when he mentions his name, he sounds smitten by her. She's a drug dealer. This is interesting. Tell me more.
I spent 3 years in Baltimore, my high school years. I made a lot of friends, like John Cole and Jada Pinkett.
You hear how you say Jada Pinkett? He was crushing. He's like, and Jada Pinkett, he was crushing, right?
This girl's bodily demand. I honk my horn just to get her attention. She said, was that for me? I said, yeah. She said, why? I said, come on and take your eye with the hell of a guy.
I loved my classes. We were exposed to everything. Theater, ballet, listen to different types of music, songs that became the soundtrack to my life.
Does this sound like the dude, like he says later, he tried it and it didn't work? Does this sound like the dude who wanted to thug life? Does it sound like he was over there here in his ballet leotard outfit? He was going to Les Miserables plays. He was having exposure to the arts side of life, right? Meanwhile, so was she, but she had more of a grit. She had more of a, I'm in the street as well as I'm in this school for performing arts, right? Mm-hmm.
What did you do that was, it seems like going from a homeless shelter to a project or having to worry about having enough food on the table must have been very difficult. How did you deal with that? Were there any therapeutic ways for you to heal?
Yo, and why is the interviewer, I think it was Tabitha, what is she's like, are there any therapeutic ways in which you try? I was like, Tabitha, you're doing the absolute most.
Heal yourself?
I smoked weed. I hung out with the drug dealers and the criminals, and I got...
And that made you feel better?
Interestingly enough, yes, because...
Remember, when he was 17, when his voice was softer, he was just growing up, he said that he came and he was taken aback by the situation in Baltimore, right? He tried to be proactive in that sense. But now when he's older, I think this is like when 1995, he's saying he hung out with the drug dealers. So because he is, as someone said, Gemini, they definitely have two sides to them, right? And there can be like both things can be true at the same time. Like he can be doing ballet and also hanging out with the drug dealers. He can do hit him up and then Malma. We see that he has this dualistic nature to him, and so it's very well possible that Jada Pinkett, in this conversation, fed into that dualistic side of him.
They have those same problems, and they found a way to get out of it. Kid, this is what I was thinking.
And so, did you end up selling drugs also because those were your?
I think I tried selling drugs for maybe 2 weeks. Then the dude was like, "Oh man, give me my drugs back," because I didn't know how to do it. I sell, somebody didn't pay me back. I'd be like, "Oh, it's okay."
Smoke most of it.
Yeah, no, I never smoked it. I just be like, "It's okay. You don't have to pay me back." Dudes would give me their watch and say,
yo, why she put in smoke most of? He's nah. You got to see the video. He looked at her like nah. But I don't know if he started selling the drugs in Baltimore, because if he did, then they wouldn't have got kicked out, right? So there was a friend who was kind of talking. So there's a possibility when his mother sends him off to Marine City in California is when he has this little short stint as a drug seller. But was he exposed to it? It stands to reason he was, because when he met Jada Pinkett, who was his heart, his bone marrow, and his toenails, she was into selling drugs. So she would have to come and tell us what in her book that she's supposed to be writing, whether or not she put Pac on to how to get money in this respect. But again, she said she was a bad drug dealer. So I don't know how this is all working out, but let's continue. For those who just joined having the conversation, I'm making the case that there's more to the story and that there's a possibility that there's a trauma bond going on here. And she may have some survivor's remorse. And this is why we may be seeing her unable to process and get beyond her feelings for Tupac, or from the experience, because she's bonded to him from a very it's part of the core place of who she is. The body wasn't finished developing. The soul wasn't finished developing. It was very in a young, impressionable stage. And he came in and presented himself as somebody who she needed. If she was a single, only child, because she has a younger brother from a father, so she was the only child growing up in this space, she would have needed that brother or that protector. And it would have been something possibly that would have attracted her to him. But let's continue.
Give me this amount for my watch.
Pawn shop.
Yeah, and I give him his watch back, and he didn't give me no money. So he was like, "No more for you." So then the dope dealers used to just look out for me when I would come back from school. They just give me money and be like, "Don't get involved with this. Get out there, do your dream." So they was like my sponsors.
Recently, you've opened up and talked to.
So the dope dealers knew that he was in school. The dope dealer knew that he had potential, and the dope dealers is like, "Bro, don't grow up and be me." So you're having conversations with them. Who introduced you to the dope dealers, Pac? I know you can't tell us, but maybe Jada can and will.
About back in your early days when you were younger, you said that you were a drug dealer, and you said you just decided that this one little piece was important.
Bad one at that.
You-
Oh, yeah.
You weren't even a good drug dealer.
That wasn't a good one.
Oh no! But you said it was finally time to share. So why was now the time?
What?
See, she said she was a bad drug dealer, but she was still hanging around. You know what I mean? He was a bad drug dealer, but hey, yeah.
I felt like there had been, and still is, a lot of missing pieces to my relationship with Tupac. And I know that there's a lot of intrigue around it. And I know that a lot of times people, kind of connect us romantically. But I think also it was time to share, because I really had an existential crisis in regards to realizing how far I had come, and having started in one place and had come out of a certain lifestyle and watched a friend go into that lifestyle, and always thought, the higher power would bring him through, and that I made it and that he didn't. Then
she says in other places that they used to talk, and he used to always say, "You're gonna make it, you have star quality." Like I said, sometimes we come into contact with people, and those people you come into contact with, to a certain degree, you can switch destinies with these people, unbeknownst to you, based on the decisions you make off of that interaction. It's wild, it's crazy, but it's something that we consider, that when you meet somebody, it changes the trajectory of your life. And she puts it into words. He ends up going in the direction that she was coming from. Now, what was the catalyst for him going in that direction? Who was the catalyst? Now, if you're sitting and knowing in yourself, like, wow, like it's for instance, someone introduces somebody to some type of recreational drugs or some type of lifestyle, and the person is able to get out, but the person you introduced didn't have the strength and the wherewithal to get out, and now they're stuck. You have to live with a bit like, yo, I introduced that person. You know what I mean? You have to live with that a little bit. And I think to a certain degree, just by the way she talking, I ain't making nothing up and putting nothing in there. The way she talking, yeah, she has something to do with it.
I was coming out, something very bad happened to me. As I was coming out of the life, he was going more into the life.
How far were you in the life, Jada? We need to know. You ain't had no goal to. Well, how far was you in the life? We need to know. Okay. And we see that later on when he was fully immersed. And we're gonna go over the different world episode, because I think that totally mirrored their actual reality in the different world episode that I think they aired in 94 or something to that effect, was exactly what their experience was. And her distancing herself from him, even though she still connected him, because you could still be connected to the person you have a trauma bond with, but still want to kind of distance yourself because you don't want to go back into that area. Like she's saying, I don't think she thought that this would be it, like that he wouldn't come back from it. You know what I mean? And if you feel comfy, if we fast forward from 15 to the time where she gets into her entanglement with Will Smith before they get married, things are moving. You're still young. You're in your young 20s. Who would thought that this would have been the end in the way that it ended? You know what I mean?
And so
didn't it sound like Sway was saying to what I said? He was like,
having kind of an existential crisis around Pac, because I was coming out, he was going in, and there was a point in which we met, and then we kind of were going our separate ways. And
she's having a crisis, even in today's space and time. He's coming out, she's coming out, and he's going in. Right. But when they were together, when they were young, when the bond was formed, they were surviving. They did it for survival. Now he felt to a certain degree that he had to go into this character that she would have known is not who he is, really, that he had to go into this character. He had to become this character in order to be successful, because, again, he hated the thought of poverty. He hated the thought. He was resentful of the way in which he grew. And so therefore, and he expressed it. And so if he has to play a role to make sure that he would not become impoverished again or be in that position, to a certain degree, it looks as though he decided that, hey, he's going to do it. Another thing that I think is interesting that revisits is the fact that when he was pregnant, when his mother was pregnant with him, she was in prison, in and out of jail because of her political activities. So part of his story in being in gestation is being behind prison walls. So he's repeating some of this. I'm going to read this little part from the book, chapter 2. It says 3 generations of shared family history. And by the way, when you're in your mother's womb, right? When you're in your mother's womb, you're taking in the things that are happening in their environment, her energy, the chemicals, the emotions, the hormones, all of that is passing through the fetus. The quote from Carl Jung. It says, I feel very strongly that I'm under the influence of things or questions which were left incomplete and unanswered by my parents and grandparents and more distant ancestors. It often seems as if they were an impersonal karma within a family, which is passed on from parents to children. It has always seemed to me that I had to complete or perhaps continue things which previous ages had left unfinished. Again, I find that interesting because we get pulled towards people. See, people think that just because we go towards somebody and we get pulled towards them, that means it's good. It doesn't necessarily mean it's good. It may be an experience that is waiting to happen. And if we open that door, that experience is going to manifest. So the door was open and the experience manifested on both sides.
And I just felt like, okay, God, one day you're going to do for Pac what you did for me. which is you saved me. And that just never happened for him. And so that is something that I'm constantly having to confront.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And I think that missing component that neither one of us have ever discussed, because
she's talking about him like he's full present in here. She says neither one of us in the present. He's dead, ma'am. He's not here to discuss. So yeah.
In our relationship was about survival.
Yeah.
That's how it started. And I know that most people want to always connect it in this romance thing, and that's just because they don't have the story. But it was based in survival.
So let's go look a little bit about trauma bonding. You heard what she said. I'm not making it up. The clues are there, but sometimes we only want to believe what we want to believe. So trauma bonding, let me see if I could get it clean. Some of the key points is trauma bonding lives in the nervous system. The brain makes association between love and abuse or neglect, right? You usually hear Stockholm syndrome. But again, if you want to look up some of the present information, look up trauma bonding. You're going to see, again, what are the chemicals, what are the hormones, what are the thoughts, what are the things that are produced when somebody bonds to somebody from a traumatic experience. She just said that their relationship was based on survival. What is a survival? Adrenaline, cortisol, all of these very base emotions that of fear, lack, all of these very base emotions produce all of these very strong, intoxicating chemical hormones like cortisol, which is a stress producing hormone, like adrenaline, all of those things that are associating with the base root chakra. I'm bringing it all together. So when she says survival, that's not lovey-dovey. Survival. How are we going to eat? Where are we going to live? How are we going to survive in these very rough streets? It says trauma bonding is a hormonal attachment. So people are like, how come she can't get over it? Why she keep crying? And why she did? I'm not caping for Jada right now. Let's just say that. I'm just looking at it from where the perspective of what I'm hearing so that we can kind of understand if you have somebody in your life, if you've had a similar experience and it's been umpteen years and you still can't get beyond it, it may be something else. It may not be what you think. Trauma bonding is a hormonal attachment created by repeated abuse, sprinkled with being saved every now and then. So if she goes home and she says she realized her mother was on drugs in her teenage years, Tupac's mother drugs, both of them are having situations at home. You may have had situations in the street, and every time you go through something together, it's like somebody in a celly or somebody in a gang. Every time you go through something traumatic together, you run the police, you nearly got shot, whatever happens, you bond over that experience. Okay. And trauma bonding in adulthood can stem from childhood trauma. So let me go back to this right here. Let's continue.
How we held each other down. You know what I'm saying? And when you have somebody that has your back, when you feel like you're nothing, that's everything. You know what I'm saying? And so...
Pause. You heard what she said. When you feel like you're nothing. 14, 15 years old, having situations where you're coming from an abusive space. He's coming from a place of lack. He may have gotten motherly love, but he didn't get fatherly correction and discipline. You're coming from a place where both of you are in lack, and you are become the support system. It's like meeting somebody in foster care, fam. It's like meeting somebody at a group home when you two bond over having one sandwich and you shared that. That's going to be a strong bond. Right? Remember when, and then you have stories like, yo, remember when that we only had $1 and I gave you 50 cents. Remember when? Those are the places where people bond over. But when you no longer are in survival mode and you can pick and choose, sometimes people go different ways because they're no longer that person anymore. Right? So let's continue here.
There's a lot of components to our story that's never shared, for a very specific reason.
What's the reason? We need to know what's the reason so we can get past this. What is the reason, ma'am? What is the reason?
And, I just decided that one little piece was important to share finally because it gives more insight to who we were.
Yes, it does. You introduce him. Let me say, did you introduce Tupac to drug dealing, Jada Pinkett? It's interesting. This very soft-spoken young man was sit down and watching Saturday morning cartoons, right, and stay at home and watch movies. Now he pop out the box talking about thug life. What's really going on? And I'm not saying, back to what I think happened in her case. I think to a certain degree, her father, she identified with the father. She said the father was a violent drunk, an angry drunk. Later on, she said she was also an angry drunk. That gave me the clue that she identified with the father. And even though she was in a feminine form, she had masculine energy, and he may have been attracted to that type of energy. Just maybe.
Yeah, this is very insightful, but it's also
What? Give me you like last year you were in New York? Yeah. Where? No, last day I was in Baltimore. The year before that I was I spent 3 years in Baltimore, my high school years, going to the School of Performing Arts. Then before that I was in New York, and I grew up. That was totally growing up part. We moved out of New York because all of these because of my mother's choices, and she couldn't keep her job because of her choices, because it was too much. Yeah, no, she was calm now. I mean, it was totally calm, but it was like they figured out who she was, and she couldn't keep a job. That should be.
So he kind of feel away, even though he loves his mother. You could tell that he kind of feel away because they were poor. So she's like kind of like this righteous advocate for all things just and right, and he's like, but we're still poor. So her choices, even though they were choices to advocate for the people, they personally didn't fare well, right? And that would lead somebody to say, hey, I know this is the right thing to do, but I'm gonna go do this so that we can X, Y, and Z. So you can see that internal conflict even in the way he's trying to protect his mother, but still admitting that, hey, it really didn't get. And then he's like, of all places, she takes us to Baltimore, which is worse than where they were coming from, right?
Legal. So she lost her job, and of course we were like stranded in New York, and stranded in New York. So we moved to Baltimore, which was total ignorance town to me, because it was just like, I mean, in Baltimore, it's just ignorant. It gets me upset to talk about it. Baltimore has the highest rate of teenage pregnancy, the highest rate of AIDS within the Black community, the highest rate of teens killing teens, and the highest rate of teenage suicide, and the highest rate of Blacks killing Blacks.
So this would even make you want to try to find a safe haven even more. Where you're coming from, you are like, New York is New York, but Baltimore, come on, right? You're going to look for some anchor. Some anchor. He said when he first got there, he made a lot of friends. You're going to look for some anchor. In addition to that, you're going to a school that represents a different side of Baltimore, a possibility that you don't live when you leave and go back to your home, right? So again, this very dualistic type of existence that he's having, we see him vacillating between the disdain for the condition of the people and the acceptance that, hey, this is what I'm gonna have to do to survive. Who knows what those conversations again were like, and why sometimes you can meet the wrong person. It's the right person, but it's the wrong person, and they put you on a whole nother path that you wouldn't have gone on had you not met that individual.
Baltimore, Maryland. And this is where we chose to live.
Oh, wait, I also think it's important to say that I was listening to her mother speak about meeting her father. Her mother got impregnated with her father when she was 17. And according to her mother, Adrian, I believe her name is, Jada Pinkett's mother said that her mother, which would be Jada Pinkett's grandmother, said, I guess before she's impregnated him, by like, not that guy. I can see that something is wrong in his eyes. So you could see that historically, like we're talking about, if it didn't start with you and there's something in your family line, her father was that guy that threw her mother off course to a certain degree, right? Jada Pinkett's father. And now she based on what we're hearing, you know what I mean? I could be wrong, but based on what I'm hearing, she became that person, that energy revisited and recycled in her. She became that person that kind of steered one in another direction that they wouldn't have gone had it not been. I'm just saying, based on what they saying, I mean, but
So as soon as I got there, being the person I am, I said, no, I'm changing this. So I started a stop killing campaign and safe sex campaign and AIDS prevention campaign and everything. And then I came back and I felt like I did a lot of good. I did good things and everything.
By the way, this is the 17-year-old talking. He just got to California. He's 17. And he had to, his mother just, pushed him out of Baltimore because of the condition. The mother was on drugs. According to her, she had a man in the house that was abusive. So there was a lot of things going on that sends him away to California to get away from it all that she would soon follow. And he's having this conversation in California.
Came back. The second week I was in California, I got a call, and two of my friends were shot dead in the head. Two of the friends that were working with me shot dead in the head. And it's just like, why try? Because this is what happens. But I still try, And I can't,
Well, you left Baltimore.
Pause. And another important thing in this narrative is that I saw that she was upset in one of the movie, the All Eyes on Moon movie, because she said that he left Baltimore without telling her. Like she didn't know he left. So I guess it was some rush movement. He didn't even have an opportunity to say goodbye to her when he left. And by the time, whatever he was introduced to in Baltimore, by the time he gets to California, he now has to survive. And he chooses whatever he was introduced to in Baltimore as his survival mechanism, right? And all of this is also connected to the experience that he had with her. Interesting.
And came to Marin City.
Yes.
And when you were in Baltimore, you were in a school of the performing arts. Yes. How come you didn't enroll in one when you came to California?
I couldn't find one when I came to California. And I was broke, so I had to go to a regular high school.
But you eventually dropped out.
Sure did. I didn't have enough credits. Like, everybody was about to graduate. I went into 12th grade, about to graduate, everything. Right before I was about to graduate, there's like, you got to come back next year and get a health credit and a physical education credit. And I was like, oh, hell no. I just barely made it out with money coming to school and lunch money and all that. I said, I got to get paid. I got to find a way to make a living. So I dropped out, knowing that I would have graduated. It wasn't no big thing. Not to say that y'all should graduate, but for me at that particular time, it was more important that I found somewhere to live.
But you did get your GED. You moved out on your own. Mm-hmm. And what did you get as far as a job is concerned? What did you do when you stopped going to school?
I only had 2 jobs ever in my life. One was in Round Table Pizza. I used to make the pizza, but it was good. It was the perfect job, Tabitha, because I was hungry and I got to like eat all the toppings off people's pizza. That's why, because everything is right there. You imagine I was making pizzas on the side, bringing pizzas home. I'm calling in my own deliveries. You know what I mean? Let me get 2 shrimp with everything. But that job, I lasted about a month. Then I worked as the guy that packed the bags in the supermarket for about, 2 weeks. And the dude kept catching me writing raps by the time clock. I used to be like, I'm a write for
instead of loading people's groceries.
She can carry her own shit. So,
did it ever occur to you that you might be able to get scholarships to go to college? Just not even...
Yo, if she don't stop saying, did it ever occur to you? So he's still in survival mode. She graduates high school, right? And this is why I said, if we look back at the Different World episode, which we probably will, we'll see it mirroring their reality. She graduates and she gets a small scholarship. Remember how he just talked about, he's going to talk about wanting to go to school, but he doesn't want the worries of where you're going to live, how you're going to eat. So he's still in survival mode. She gets a small scholarship and she gets the opportunity to leave Baltimore. Right, but he leaves Baltimore and goes into a worse situation that's to ultimately put him on the course that brought him to the end of his life. So again, that guilt that rests with somebody of meeting them in one condition and seeing where they end up, it may be what in her and what ultimately affected the rest of her life.
I wanted to go to college, but I wanted to go to college and be comfortable. like how people, like, I don't know, this might be presumptuous, but like I know a lot of people that are in college, they have their lives already okay. You know what I mean? Like someone's paying for them to go to college.
I wonder who. He went to school with many people, but I wonder who they playing. She got a scholarship. She tried to minimize it and like, I got a small scholarship, but she gets a scholarship. She's able to attend a college, and he had to leave the school before he graduated because his mother couldn't pay the bills and they were going to get evicted. So again, some of that also is building up, I think, especially in a young male, that's building up a level of resentment. You know what I mean?
They have somewhere to live. That's somewhere to live while they're going to college. You know, they get money, all that. Somebody can pay the tuition and all of that. I don't have that. Until I can have that, I can't go to college, even though I want to, because that turned me on.
With all the encouragement that you got in Baltimore at the High School of Performing Arts for your acting, did it ever occur to you to come out to California and be a professional actor here when your mom moved out here?
Nah, that was the last thing on my mind. I came to California, I was broke, nowhere to stay.
What do you mean nowhere to stay?
I didn't have anywhere to stay. I was staying with a friend of a friend of a friend of my mother.
Why weren't you staying with your mother?
Because she was in Baltimore. We didn't have any lights and electricity. We was about to get evicted, so she sent me first. You know.
Okay, you heard him say it again. For those who just joined us, welcome to the conversation. I played it straight at the beginning, and I'm giving my Soulonomics breakdown of the initial relationship between Jada Pinkett based on what they said, not just based on what I want to believe. Based on what they're saying and the little bits and pieces that they did give at different times throughout the time that they met. They met at a very pivotal point. She was just turning 15. He was 15. I think he was crushing on her. They realized, according to what she keeps saying, that there wasn't any necessarily romantic, but they filled the void for one another. Let's just say that, if I could say that. There was definitely a level of filling a void and identifying with one another, right? On some level, when they needed each other in the very strenuous situations that they may have found themselves as young adults. We also have to keep in mind that when we're teenagers, we don't have all the information to, even as adults, we don't have all the information to navigate through trauma and issues that we're experiencing. So much so teenagers who, from all different parts of their growth of development up until that point, they have been traumatized in one way or another. You don't have all the answers. You don't know what adults are you going to necessarily go to help you navigate your way through this. So sometimes during those places, young adults and children, we make up things. We tell ourselves stories. We do what we need to do to survive, as she said, to get through those very dark places, right? And again, because this is early on, the bond would be really, really strong, especially if this is the first person to step up for her in this capacity, and if he's the first person, she's the first person to fill that void for him in this capacity.
How mothers do. Protect the young. So I went out there broke. I wasn't even thinking about acting. I was just thinking about surviving.
And so that really, I had that aha moment maybe about 2 days ago. And, nobody really knew that aspect of my life, that I had started out one way, right, and Pac, started out one way, and then we kind of switched roles. It was
destiny swapping. She kind of switched roles. Yeah, that's called a destiny swap. And you came into contact with somebody, they took on big because y'all energetically vibrated, and energetically you had similar things in the background of your family history.
That bound us, but it was also the thing that broke us apart as well.
How deep were you in that life, and how did you save yourself?
My mother saved me. My mother saved me. My mother got me out of Baltimore. I had gotten a scholarship, a small little scholarship to go to North Carolina School for the Arts, and something really horrible had happened to me that she found out about.
What is the horrible thing? Yo, Jada, you a whole 50 years old. Can we just get this so life could go on? She's like, I'm gonna write the book. Bruh, you had a long time to write this book. You could have just wrote it with all the red table talk. Just put it in one place, man. She's like, a horrible thing happened. What's the horrible thing, Jada? What's the horrible thing?
And, one day she just packed the car and was just like, you're getting out of here. And, there's no you're going to do exactly what I say, and you're going to get in the car right now. She drove me to North Carolina School for the Arts and enrolled me, and my life completely took another turn from there.
Her life completely took another turn from there. And according to the story, she only stayed there for 1 year. And from there, she, I guess she wanted to change her major, whatever. And her mother sends her to California or something to that effect. And then she starts getting acting roles and acting gigs. And on the same token, he makes his way in, but he makes his way in another way, and he makes his way in through music and digital underground. And eventually he all gets into acting. But again, he had to put on the experiences that he had getting beat up by police and all of these other things, experiences that he had kind of changed him in a lot of ways. And he settled into this role that we saw him continue to act out throughout the duration of his life. So that's kind of my thoughts. I said that I think there was a trauma bond. She may be, let me read you one more thing as it relates to survivor's remorse, right? They say that there are 5 stages of grieving. Let me close this right here. They say that there's 5 stages of grieving. And when we move through these stages of grieving, it's not like, you got at this stage, you get 5 days. No, however you move through the stage. But if at any stage that you don't process and allow yourself to move through, then you get stuck. And there's some people who can never get over a loss. And it could be for many reasons. Right? They may feel guilt, or they may feel anger, or the time that the person died, you weren't on good standing with them, or you didn't say what you wanted to say and you can't accept. In her case, like she said, they swapped places. And I think to some degree, like she said, she was having an existential crisis about that. She may have felt that she played a role in the direction his life took. Traumatic grief and survivor's guilt. What is survivor's guilt? Survivor's guilt is the experience and phenomena of when an individual survives a life-threatening, traumatic, and or overwhelming experience. Essentially, someone else's experience were not your own. Not everyone who survives a traumatic experience will develop survivor's guilt. Research and training in the area of survivor's guilt is still relatively new. It goes on to say, she said in an interview, there's not a day that goes by she doesn't think of him. And people are like, oh my goodness, you're so in love with him. I'm like, bruh, let's back up from the conversation for a minute. If every day you have these intrusive thoughts and there's not a day that go by that you don't think of him, and if your young daughter is writing poems to say, please come back and hopefully my mom can feel happy again, there's something else going on there in this grieving process. She said that she called his mother when she heard he was shot, and she said, did you think I should come now? And the mother was like, nah, thinking he's going to make it through, and he never made it through. Sometimes people replay those things over and over in their mind, and how responsible they feel is determined how you see that they react and how they react to everybody else that's around them. Survivor's guilt, remorse or guilt for having survived a catastrophic event when others did not, or for not surviving the ills that others had to endure. It is a common reaction stemmed in part from a feeling of having failed to do enough to prevent the event or to save those who did not survive. You heard what she said. She thought the divine was going to help him the way it helped her, but that didn't happen. Survivor's guilt is often experienced by family members who are found not to carry, what is this? Genetic mutations that have led to disease and often death in other family members, or by family or friends who feel they did not do enough to secure their loved ones prior to death. Just a little insight. Let me know your thoughts on this. Let me come and see what you have said in the comment section. And then I'm going to wrap it up, finish drinking my tea. Welcome to those who have just joined us. Hopefully this put a little something extra into the pot, as this conversation is never ending. Now, I was just dealing with particular part, not the Will Smith, not the slap. Everything is an extension. Let me say this. We know that it happens here. It's not resolved. So in the case of the Will Smith, I will say briefly from what I've heard them say. She has this relationship with Tupac. He does not have the stability. She needs stability. She knows that they're coming from this space of survival. He does not have the stability financially, and maybe otherwise, to be attractive to her uh, in other ways, right? But they still have this bond. According to the narrative, he's gone in California and she is doing her thing. In 1992, Will Smith has said that he sees her on a different world. It's important, just stick with me a little bit. He sees her on a different world and he wants to talk. He's already doing Fresh Prince and he's attracted to this girl. He said he knew when he saw her that they would make magic. He said there's a few people seen in his life, when he sees them, he knows that it will be magical. Again, like I'm saying, sometimes we're attracted to people that are going to allow us to have that experience that is waiting in the wings based on our ancestors. So what he may have saw was magical, but it wasn't the magic that he wanted. Okay. According to the narrative, he asks Alfonso Rivera if he knew her. He says he knows somebody. He does, and they try to go to the set of A Different World to talk to her. While he's on the set, his plans are interrupted when he sees the first wife, and he ends up getting with the first wife. This is his narrative. But in his mind, she was always the person that he wanted to go towards. So when whatever happens with the first wife, he feels he married the wrong woman in the first wife and things are going downhill. When the first wife wants divorced, the first thing he does is call her. So he went back. Not only say you got saved the first time, like, nah, this is not your course. This is not what you're going to take. If it's an experience that you are supposed to have, you are going to keep pushing, even if it's to your own demise. So people have to also keep into remembrance that he was already married, but even though he didn't want a quote unquote divorce, he wasn't fully present. And maybe the original wife felt that and she wanted to be out. And the first thing he does, according to the mother and her, while he's still in the marriage, is call her to secure the one he originally wanted. So Will Smith manifested the experience that he's having. And in his situation, from what I've observed, because I'm just going to get this all out of my head so I can move on with life. From what I'm observing is that he identified with the father. I mean, with his mother. His mother was abused. He couldn't secure the mother according to his estimation, and the father was the abuser. Now, remember what I said. Sometimes we attract similar energies. Jada's father was the abuser. Jada identified with the father. Will's father was the abuser. Will identified with the mother. Therefore, the roles have switched, even though the genders are the same, and she becomes the abusive type one, and he becomes the one who's trying to withstand the abuse. And because it's represented in a female as opposed to a male, it looks very weird, but the energy is the same. And that may have been why he was attracted to her in the first place, because he was already exposed to this energy in his home. And the first wife may not have brought that energy, and therefore it may have been foreign to him. Sometimes people have good people, but they can't recognize the good. The good is foreign to them because they're programmed for dysfunction. Both of these parties, all three of these entangled ones, were programmed from dysfunction from the beginning. Judah says, let me see here, what's going on here. Why? I'm just reading because some of this stuff y'all said before, so if black men are the ones drug dealing, this part of the conversation, I'm just going to go and see something because I said so much. I don't know what y'all responding to. So if there's something that I can respond to, I will. And if we're not on topic, I'm not going to respond today. What is a person who continuously trauma bonds? It's an unhealed person, India. A person who continually gets into trauma bonds is an unhealed person, right? Because remember, a trauma bond, you have to have some type of trauma, a traumatic experience that you are bonding over, right? People who go to AA meetings, they form trauma bonds. Why? Because they're going to AA meetings, exposing themselves, having conversations about their addictions, and that is an event of which they bond over. People who go to maternity meetings, they bond over being pregnant. So people can bond over different things. But if it's a traumatic situation, then that type of bond is stronger than most bonds. And oftentimes people don't understand that. But there's a I have, but I can't dig it up right now. What's the name of the book? I got to tell y'all the name of the book. Maybe I'll come back and talk about what's the name of the book. Now I got to pull up the name of the book. Hold on one second, peoples. It's packed up some here. I just want to get the name of the book. It's a blue and white book. I'll tell you right now. Because understanding this is to understand why she would, when she says that, because she has a lot of the, what they call the Virgo energy, the person who wants to fix things, the helper, that type of vibration. She may not see the fullness of, right. The betrayal bond is what is called by Patrick J. Carnes, PhD, breaking free of exploitive relationships. Where's my book anyway? Where's that book? Yeah, so that book goes deeply into trauma bonds, and I think it's important to understand why she may repeatedly have trauma bonds. Now, Will represented a safe space. She talked about domestic violence. Her mother talks about domestic violence, how the father threw her off the balcony. The father was wild, crazy. And Jada speaks about one point where she was with someone before Will Smith, and that person emotionally was intimidating and abusive, and she had to defend herself and ultimately ran out the relationship. She said something I found fascinating. She said the next time that person saw her, she was with Will Smith. So Will Smith represents a safe place. It doesn't necessarily represent the place she may have ultimately wanted to be, but if somebody wants to escape a certain lifestyle, a certain way of being, sometimes you go to a halfway house, or you go to a place where it may be safe. It may not be the place that you ultimately wanted to live. This is why she keeps saying, I didn't want to get married. She may have had marriage issues because her mother and father was married and it didn't work well, right? So we learn these things. We adopt certain thought processes from a childlike mind, not having the full story, and just say, well, I don't want a traditional relationship. You tell yourself things. People do it all the time. So he may have represented a safe place for her, a level of stability for her, but because she was in running mode, it may have been too much to where what he was giving her, she didn't feel that she deserved to a certain degree. And that would be where, when one time when he asked, she's ungrateful, and he was like, yeah, that's where the ingratitude comes in to a certain degree. Not caping for her, just looking at the situation for what it is. I don't know. We're talking about drug dealers. Yeah, some people look up to drug dealers. What does a drug dealer do? They provide, protect for some. So for some people who do not have that paternal father figure within the home, they may look to somebody of this nature to protect and provide. Okay. Don't know what y'all talking about. Jada's grandmother. No, Jada's grandmother wasn't single. According to the narrative, what her mother said was she doesn't know how they attracted abusive men because she didn't see it in her household. Jada's grandmother had a husband. So I'm not sure about that, John. Bryce says, my cousins were his mentors in Maryland. They always blur them out of the picture where you see him in the red and blue. Don't believe, but it's the truth. They grew up with his mother in Lenore, California. She didn't realize who he was to years later. His mother says his mother's from North Carolina. Thanks for sharing, Bryce. Okay, Queen Nzinga says, I've dealt with survivor's remorse before during the grieving of the loss of my family. Life paths are not only physical. Yep, they're very spiritual. They're very spiritual. We love the familiar, even if it's not good for us. That's correct. And sometimes reject the spiritual rescue of others in our life. It's kind of like people say, food, for instance, is something very tangible that we can relate to. Even though food may not be good for us, we gravitate towards what is familiar, right? What first whet your palate, what you were accustomed to, good, bad, or indifferent. So people will say soul food is not good. It has all kind of fat and oil, but because it's familiar, it's tied to all of these memories, it's tied to all of these experiences, it's tied to all these people. People are going to gravitate towards it because it is familiar. So it is with energy, so it is with people, so it is with experiences. They all made decisions in their lives based on survival. That's absolutely correct. Let's give them a moment. Thank you those for just joining us. If you have anything to say, I'm gonna drop the link right now. I'm gonna play a little commercial because this video is sponsored by the Yummy Cottage. So you don't know, we're gonna bring the Yummy Cottage and then I'm gonna share the link and we'll come back and go ahead and give us your closing thoughts. Yep. Sponsored by the Yummy Cottage. So if you're new to the channel, check out the yummycottage.com. We currently have 16% off on our syrups. Go on over there and check it out. I dropped the link in the box. Didn't you say that the grandmother told them about the abusive guy? She said she can see something wrong with him. Yes, she said she saw it in his eyes. That's what the grandmother said. That's what they said the grandmother said. The grandmother said to leave Jada's father alone because she could see something in his eyes. And ultimately, there was something in his eyes because he was, highly talented, but also abusive and addicted to drugs. So with that said, we're going to bring everybody in. I'll just ask that when we come in, be mindful of time. Also, please, may we also be respectful as we come in and share our thoughts on what was presented here today. I look forward to this discussion. Welcome, Queen Nzinga, to the discussion.
Hey,
What's going on?
how you doing? Let me turn up my volume. I can barely hear you.
No, I can hear you. I
Hey,
can hear
good
you.
day.
Good day. I'm doing well. I had to get this off real quick because I was bringing in too much of the information. I'm like, let me just put these puzzle pieces together and lay it on the board. What are your thoughts?
Wow, I like what you're talking about here because I think this is very important to us as a community.
Mm-hmm.
Because Black people, just in general, I mean, all people, really, if you've lived any time in this life, you're going to have trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And no one knows how one is going to respond or react to the trauma that you may experience. And it may be a continuous thing, such as survivor's remorse, which is an offshoot of grief. And the grieving process, there's no time limit to grief. There's no time limit. You can grieve as long as that pain is still there. So it can be years, decades. It's unfortunate, when we talk about PTSD is a form of survivor's remorse for a lot of people. It's a form of trauma. So, yeah, I think this is a good conversation. We're getting past all of the blaming people because you know what? You're responsible for your life. No one else is responsible for your life. You're responsible for the decisions that you make in your life. Everything is based on decision making. Everything in this life. You make decisions. You have free will. That's it.
This is true. This is very true. We make decisions based on information, limited or otherwise, based on what we think was best at the time. And oftentimes, when we make decisions in survival mode, they're very short term, oriented. They're not looking at the longevity of it. And Yeah, that's historically many people, our foreparents have made very survivalistic decisions that in the long term, may have caused more harm than good, but it's the truth of what it is.
Well,
Uh,
when you make decisions out of a space of survival mode, it's usually not with the vision of long term. It's usually just for right now and not for long term.
that's a fact. So we see some, based on what he has shared, many of his decisions were, very short decisions based on survival. In
Yeah.
the beginning, her conversation was about survival. So when you hear them talk about, or hear her talking about the bond and the this and the that, it may be more to the story that is not being shared. And if we look into our own lives and see uh, some of the similarities, like I said, to not consider how young these people were, is to miss out on a lot that we can learn about how we got to where we are today. If you can understand what I'm saying, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a song that came out by Adele. What's that song that recently came out by Adele?
Oh,
Go
I don't
Easy.
know.
Go
Okay.
easy on me, baby. Right? If you look at the song, the joint is played like how many million times? Because she's speaking about making choices at a time in your life when you were still a child, making choices
Mm,
when you didn't know the reality of what you were actually doing, right? And how
mm-hmm.
it would affect you into the now. And to take that out of the equation, I think does the story and many stories a great disservice, because the expectations that we have of, when you look back, I can look at my 14-year-old and be like, what decision, life decision, could you really make that you would actually understand the consequences of in the times to come?
None.
There's no way you
None.
can really know what is gonna, you know what I mean? At 14 years
And
old, at
and
15
and
years old,
sometimes even at 14, you don't have any real long-term wise information. You just
no,
you're fresh from being a toddler.
correct.
So you don't have that information. Sometimes even people who are adults in their 40s, 50s, 60s make decisions that are not the best decisions. But when
Right.
you're under duress and
Mm-hmm.
and pressured by poverty,
Mm-hmm.
especially in impoverished neighborhoods, you know the outlets
Are
are
minimal,
are
are
your your
limited,
your choices are limited. Your
very
choices are
limited.
limited.
Very limited. So that's something also to keep into consideration, that it's. But I found it interesting. I didn't put it in there, but he said when he went to California, he was trying to do the activist thing. Like, this is what my mother taught me. I'm gonna try to do this, right? And so he realized when he was talking to the women respectfully, they were saying to him, "I can't talk to you because you're too nice." Right. And so in his mind, he reasoned with the information that his mother gave him, right? That if I treated you right and I treated you nice, then you should return. I think to a certain degree, when it didn't happen, then, he started calling them, he started doing the things that got the results he was looking for. And this is how we see this type of split personality, that the foundation is laid is this son of a panther, right? And on top of that is this overlay of, this is what's going to move me to where I'm trying to get to. Because everybody else I know ended up in jail, ended up on the run, or is impoverished and on drugs. Okay, that path is not working. You know what I mean? That so
Yeah.
it's just interesting to look at the person's life, their experiences, and like I said, hopefully we take some of this information home and do some studying on it to see how it affected our life. What brought us to this point? What unfinished business from those who came before us is kind of directing us subconsciously to where we are? You know what I mean? And we're like, well,
Yes.
let me read it back again, that quote. Hold on. I was like,
That
hold on, let
that's
me get this.
happening with me right now. The resurgence of looking at my family's life and where I actually came from and the people that I came from. very admirable people, very admirable qualities. Under duress, they made different decisions from other people in their communities. I knew Tupac, and Tupac was one of my clients. Um, and I've had many clients, that. But,
Mm-hmm.
just watching his trajectory, it was hard to believe that because he was so brilliant, he was so smart. Not, not even just smart, because a dog is smart, but he was intelligent, and his critical thinking skills were amazing. So, that was, I believe, what helped him to navigate in his survival mode. Um, Now, the people he chose to hang around with to come up out of that poverty state helped him in a lot of ways. I mean, he got with drug dealers, higher end drug dealers, who wound up having record labels. I
Yeah.
mean, when you put it all together and you look at it from that point of view, the trajectory of his life clearly was limited, but was purposeful. So the work that he did in terms of bringing awareness to Black people, I think he did. His life was an example of that. It may not have been what his mother did, the way that she did it, with the organization that she did it with, but he did have input in society, great impact.
So
So to know that Jada was there in the beginning, I do think she has survivor's remorse about a lot of things, perhaps, in
why
her
did
life.
John is over here certain that you didn't know Tupac? I can't with John.
Who cares what John thinks?
Y'all behave. We having a good discussion. Let's not go all off today.
Mhm.
um, um, what was I gonna say? Right now, she is getting a lot of flack because of the choices that she continued to make, and the course that her life has taken. I think the impoverished part they dealt with, she has dealt with that, right? She made it. She's no longer in lack. She no longer has to worry. But now I think the red table, when I look back at some of the earlier red tables, it was indicative of the need to now work on the soul, right? Because now that you have money and you don't have to worry about the monetary things in life, what you wake up with every day is you, the internal you, right? And there may have been things that is just overwhelming. And this is what we're seeing. People like, why are you coming out telling us all your business? And it may be now where the only other thing in your mind that you need to do is work on the things that are unseen, that have been weighing you down. I mean, she's monetizing it, you know what I mean? But this is what I'm seeing in this part of the conversation, why they're being so transparent and so open to the public of all of these things that we really didn't ask for. I think it helps facilitate a discussion. In some spaces, they've gone too far and really pushed some other type agendas, but in the spaces where they were more authentic, I think it opens up a conversation that allowed me to put together these few pieces that I did based on some of the research that I've heard before. I see Naasha
Well,
came into the
this
go.
generation seems to constantly call for transparency, but
Right.
can't handle the truth.
This
You
is
know,
also
there's that the scene in Officer and a Gentleman. You can't handle the truth.
true. Yeah.
You can't handle the truth. You want it, but you can't handle it. So now that you've gotten the truth, it's forcing people to look at their own lives. And
Yeah.
nobody's life, nobody is perfect. All of our roads are filled with pitfalls,
Experiences.
mountains,
Yeah.
valleys,
Hmm.
you know, that's just the way life is. So how you handle it, just because they're public figures doesn't necessarily mean that they have to give you their personal life.
Yeah.
All you're really supposed to take away from these entertainers is the entertainment that they bring to you. That's it. That's really their jobs. Their personal lives are really none of your business.
I wanted to share a part right here, and then I'm give it to John over here, just entertaining himself. We're gonna let you entertain yourself in the comment section.
I mean, who
I wanted
cares about what he says? I really don't
we
care.
we we're gonna quickly
He's
read a
so
part about.
insignificant to me. John, you're insignificant.
Oh, may we be blessed this day. Unconscious memory. As a matter of fact, before I read unconscious memory, let's hear what Naasha has to say.
Greetings.
Hey, Naasha, what's
And,
going
Greetings, Nasha.
hi.
How are you, beloved?
I'm fine. I'm a little bit outside. But thank you for the topic. It was just beautiful.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining
About,
us.
yes, about authenticity and trauma bonding and I like the part what Queen Zinga and you said that you don't know as a child, even as a 27-year-old woman now, you do not know. You hope you do the best decision, but I respect. When I look at women who already have children in my age, even younger, I respect them because there's so much things you don't know. If it's right or wrong, you don't even know. You you try to give your best, and if if I am struggling now as a 27-year-old, how then would a 14-year-old deal with all of this? It's crazy out there. It's so crazy. That's all I wanted
Yeah.
to say. Yes,
Thank you
we
so.
need support. Yes.
Yeah, definitely, and that's kind of sometimes we lose. I think Queen Nzinga said the humanity in it. People are human. You may again because of this idol status that people put people into. We have expectations that they have access to more knowledge and more understanding and more than they have access to money and notoriety. You don't necessarily have access to outside of that things that the everyday person doesn't have access to. And at one point, especially at this point in their life, they were the everyday person. Right?
And
They
two,
made
you
these
have to
choices.
remember the era that it was in. We're talking about the early 90s, you
Right.
know. In the 90s, I was in my 20s. So, you know, these people who are younger than myself at the time, how did they navigate through what I remember being in the 90s in New York and Los Angeles? It's a different, what you're seeing right now is a different world. It really is. So the things that look crazy to this generation right now was not so crazy back then.
Right. Right. Okay, I'm gonna leave everybody with a little something to think about. What we running at 1:38. If anybody have anything else to say, link from the book. It didn't start with you. This book's dealing with a lot of stuff I often talk about, among other books that I've read. This one talks about unfinished storylines from your family and the people who you resonate with energetically. You kind of take on that unfinished storyline, if that makes sense. And then because you didn't begin the storyline, it feels a bit confusing, right? You don't know why you're experiencing that. You may want the ending to be something different, but energetically, you're being pulled to have these experiences that at the end of the day, if you don't really go back to understand who you're identifying with and what's going on, you would just keep looping. You just keep looping. Okay. So this is coming from chapter, what is this? If you have the book, it's chapter 4, a core language approach. Talking about traumatic experiences, since we're talking about trauma bonds and why sometimes people lose words Sometimes you'll see her talking and she'll just start crying or she'll lose words or whatever the case may be. Traumatic experiences are often stored as non-declarative memory. When an event becomes so overwhelming that we lose our words, we can't accurately record or declare the memory in story form, which requires language to do so. It's as though a flash flood is streaming through all our doors and windows at once. In the danger, we don't stop long enough to put our experiences into words. We just leave the house. Without words, we no longer have full access to our memories of the event. Fragments of the experience go unnamed and submerge out of sight, lost, and undeclared. They become part of our unconscious, or some will say subconscious. The vast reservoir of our unconsciousness appears to hold not only our traumatic memories, but also the unresolved traumatic experiences of our ancestors. This is why some people say you will see a Yana Van Zant telling them, speak it, speak it, speak it out, right? She'll be rocking them and doing the craziness and it look like she's wilding. What she's saying to them is give voice to this, right? Because it's coming from a deeper place within the soul. Oftentimes we haven't even the courage to utter it. And when you give voice to it, it helps to purge it and to bring it up. In this shared unconsciousness, we seem to re-experience fragments of our ancestors' memories and declare them as our own. So we don't just inherit their body type, their eye color, their skin complexion. We inherit their experiences, right? Good, bad, and indifferent to a certain degree. And some of the stuff is not coming from us. But again, in this situation, I could already see the dots connected that her father, through her mother, of course, she identified with the father. She became somebody that was the catalyst to throw somebody else, of course, right? It may have been intentional or unintentional. She may have been unaware, who knows? But to some degree, there's a level of responsibility that she feels why she's carrying this grief up until 20 something years later. That's just my observation. You guys let me know what's yours. Queen Nzinga, do you have any closing thoughts before we say toodaloo? I'm about to run out and do some things this beautiful Sunday.
Well, I think you've said it all. I really do. I think it was well said by you. You know, there are things that are part of our DNA. It's
Yep,
called epigenetics.
that's correct.
And epigenetics gives us what my mother used to call genetic recall. And sometimes we repeat the history of our parents based on not what we know, but what our DNA knows.
That's facts.
And
I,
so we move around in the world similar to the way that our parents would move in the world in a different time, in a
mhm.
different body. And our experiences are based on the previous generation.
And their reactions to it. I tell y'all a story about the syrup that I started selling on the Yummy Cottage, and then I'll go. So, like 2 years ago, like on different products, see what will work, you know. And I started making syrups, but I needed to perfect it a little bit. So I came back around to it this, and one day I'm standing at the pot, like boiling down the syrup, doing this process, infusing it and everything, and I just had deja vu. I was just like, yo, I've done this before. Like intuitively. I said, when I get home, I gotta remember ask my mother if one of my aunts, because from the Caribbean, they were into sugar processing, right? And so when I came home, I was like, did any one of my foreparents like work in this part of the process? And so she calls my aunt, who's like the family recorder, and she was like, yeah, your grandfather went to Cuba and he was working with sugar production, this, that, and that. This is how the other day you see me found it. This is what led me to finding some information about Panama and they go there and doing different things is because, like you're saying, sometimes it comes back. This is why ultimately I named it Isaacs. If anybody's asking, the story behind that is my grandparents' surname was Isaacs, right? And because this felt so familiar to me, I'm like, you know what? Maybe this is some incomplete part of the process that I can bring to fruition in today's space and time. And so that was the backstory behind that. But I have had situations and circumstances where I just knew something and I didn't know how I knew it. right? I've you have deja vu, you have the feeling like I've been here before, but not in this lifetime. And so when you really become in touch with your personal experience, not just always projecting outwards, I just use these kind of conversations to get back to the self. Because sometimes we interested more in other people than we are ourselves. I don't know why. But when we start to get into that space, into that zone, into our lineage, into understanding that, like they say, you're your ancestors' wildest dreams, right? Then what were they thinking about? What were they hoping for? What were they praying for? Right? What are you representing? What are you missing? What will you falling? Right? I've done a lot, and I agree, Bryce. I've been telling people here on this channel, do your family research, do your history. Because then you will understand, okay, what part of this puzzle am I missing? How do I close this particular chapter? Right? Some people are having the same experience because of the prayers they prayed, or because of the negative things they did to other people, or it can be a whole host of reasons why you're looping. And in order to stop looping, we have to turn around and really sit in whatever that experience is, so that we can get clarity of how to get to the other side. And I'm not just talking from what I don't know. Like I said, I've shared the whole process. I've written books about my own experiences. I've, all of that. And I pray that all get the strength, the knowledge, and the wherewithal to navigate, because that's what this life experiences, in my estimation, is about. We have an opportunity. When you have life and breath and the ability to move, that's an opportunity to do that which the non-living cannot do. Let me just say that. So with that said, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. That's not correct, John. I'm with Bryce on that one. I said I was going to go, but John isn't here. Let's make it simple. Traumatized people that have kids can only teach their kids to repeat their mistakes. No, you can teach your children two things. They don't know any better, and that's why broken people aren't supposed to have children. No. Children can learn from what you do, and they can make the choice to do what you don't do. You can be an example of what to do, and you can be an example of what not to do. You can be an example of what to be, and you can be an example of what not to be. The child ultimately is going to make the choice, because you may have a situation where you're illustrating something for the child, and they instinctively, intuitively know that's not the right way to go, and they don't go that way. So that is a simplistic thought process on children. When we have children, you grow. You don't know what you don't know until you move through the process and you grow from that experience of having children. It's a whole nother level of growth. Even growing children, rearing children, your own, somebody else's, younger siblings, whoever it is, you grow in the process of helping other people to grow. So there's no perfect parent that knows what they know until the child comes. You don't know what you don't know. You don't know what you would do, and you don't know what you won't do. So it's all an opportunity. That's what life is. And may we continue to take this opportunity and do the best with it that we can. So with that said, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Everybody have a blessed day. Make it the best day when you have a blessed day. All right. Let me go out on one more Yummy Cottage commercial, and we will talk again. I don't know what I keep doing.